Grace Radio begins.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of Radical Grace Radio.
I'm Pastor Gary Held.
And my name is Matthew Pancake, and this is episode, I'm not even sure which one it is, 810. Yeah. And this is a program where, what we've been doing is we've been talking, emphasis on thinking with the mind of Christ, because, we spent 3 years under pandemic conditions thinking with the mind of something, and we were lost quite a bit, over time. But it's time to get back to, thinking with the mind of Christ, because there's a lot to think about. And if any of you out there, you know that there's a lot to think about now that we're in the after game, I guess you could call it, of the pandemic.
Yeah. It's about thinking about what kind of, frankly, here's the best thing, not the only thing by any means, but what kind of church do we want to be going forward? Is anybody going to be satisfied if we just say, well, that pandemic, that was rough. Now let's go back to having everything be the same as it was before. Really? We couldn't do better than that? Maybe it's time to.
Yeah, that's the thing is upheavals like this, they're good for you. It's something that gets prayed about, stir us up, oh Lord, right? We got
pray that frequently during especially Advent. So right. It's not a surprise, not a complete surprise.
Right. So that's a thing, you've had the opportunity. One of the things is like, I don't know, would we be doing this like we're doing right now? I mean, we've been doing video shows, doing our shows like a video. So it's an experiment. Yeah. It seems like it's a successful one. So now we know we can do a thing. I'm not 100% sure we would be doing it if it wasn't for the pandemic. I know a lot of churches wouldn't be streaming if it wasn't for the pandemic.
That's definitely true. One thing that we need to do, I think, at some point is we need to make sure, and there's a way you can do this, but I don't think it's set by default. So you put your videos up on a YouTube channel, and I don't think by default it's open for people to comment or, like and comment on your videos. Now, that's how the algorithm gets them, more popular by lots of people watching the whole thing to the end and then liking on it. That would really help. Subscribing obviously helps, but some commentary, like, I think we would be good about answering people's questions and comments, in on the YouTube channel. So you don't know until you start, right? Until you try.
Yep. That's the thing is, well, it is open. Radical Grace Radio on YouTube. You can go there and do that. So let's do one of those things that I guess you could say it's one of our staples. And there's actually some important stuff in here today. The news roll. Let's hit it. California Governor Gavin Newsome has announced that the state government will cut ties with Walgreens after the pharmacy chain refused to sell abortion pills in 24 states. Walgreens' decision came after the attorneys general of 20 states sent a joint letter to CVS and Walgreens stating the sale of mifepristone in their respective states would violate the Comstock Act. Go ahead and look it up. I don't know if we want to get into it again. The Guttmacher Institute revealed that the medication-induced abortions accounted for more than half of all facility-based abortions, so those state regulations will certainly have an impact on abortion access. The attorneys general in 23 Republican-led states barring the use of mifepristone have joined a lawsuit intending to overturn the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's approval of the drug for abortion. In response, Newsome stated that the state would not pursue business with companies that cave to right-wing bullies pushing their extremist agenda or companies that put politics above the health of women and girls.
All right.
See, I can do that on video. And people can see that.
Okay. Good. So
good
the number 2 story is that a federal court has reinstated a 2016 Florida law allowing the state to strip taxpayer funding from Planned Parenthood. Now, the court cited the overturning of Roe v. Wade as its justification. The law was previously blocked in 2016 by a court injunction. Still, Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody announced last month that she was going to vacate the injunction, citing the overturning of Roe last year as justification, and the plaintiffs in the case expressed no opposition to the reinstatement of the law, provided it does not take place before June 1st. The defendants agreed to the delay. In 2016, the Florida lawmakers passed House Bill 1411, prohibiting taxpayer money from funding abortion clinics unless the abortions were performed based on rape, incest, or life-threatening medical emergency for the mother.
So there's a win. Now, Illinois' Eastview Christian Church has hired an attorney from the law firm of Wagenmacher and Oberle to investigate allegations of its senior pastor, Mike Baker, and that he covered up his son's sexual misconduct while he was employed at the church. The church announced Kelly Fabian Story will lead the investigation team, which is expected to take 3 months. Baker resigned as Central Christian Church after they fired his son, Caleb Baker, over allegations of an extramarital affair with another church staff member. Eastview Christian Church elders stated that they only became aware of the allegations after Caleb Baker had left the church in 2016. An independent investigation was initiated after a former employee complained about an abusive culture in 2022. I wonder what that one's going to be about.
Well,
there is one thing I've got to give the churches that do exercise some transparency on these things. At least they are. Whatever, the outcomes aside, because some churches, they go through the dog and pony show of the investigation, and but at least there's some transparency going on when this stuff comes up these days.
Yeah, that actually, it's sort of forced transparency. So I'm going to give it,
but it's transparency nonetheless.
It's okay. I'm going to give it that much credit, but it is kind of like, we're making you do this, or it's worse if they find out later that we weren't transparent. Yeah. So, okay. So the number 2 story, I think I said, I hope I didn't say number 2 before, but this is
you're right.
The number 2 story. So Palm Beach County in Florida lost an appeal after a city ordinance that had banned licensed counselors from providing talk therapy to minors who wanted help with some same-sex attraction or their gender confusion. Well, anyway, the United States District Court, Southern District of Florida, found that the ban was unconstitutional, and Palm Beach County was ordered to compensate the counselors. Liberty Counsel, who represented the counselors, issued a statement from its founder and chairman, Matt Staver, who warned that similar counseling bans violate the First Amendment and that this case is the beginning of the end of similar unconstitutional counseling bans around the country. Currently, licensed counselors in Florida, Alabama, and Georgia are free to provide talk therapy to minors who want help with same-sex attraction or gender confusion.
I think Jordan Peterson would like that one. Too bad he lives in Canada, right?
Well, I guess
it'd be nice, wouldn't he?
He would approve of that. That's
he would
true.
approve of it. Yeah, he's got a lot of problems with that one. Okay, and the number 1 story, and this one, it's funny because I'd selected this one a couple of days ago and hadn't really read up on it, and it turns out to be, it's a real problem. The Washington Elementary School District in Arizona has decided to end its 11-year partnership with Arizona Christian University. We're going to call it ACU after this, in supplying student teachers. Now, here's what's going on. 3 out of 5 school board members who identify as members of the LGBT community expressed concern over what they saw as ACU's Christian beliefs being a threat to LGBTQ students. Board members expressed concern over ACU's commitment to biblical values, traditional sexual morality, and marriage between one man and one woman. ACU students were required to sign legal agreements to prevent discrimination against any student. And still, The decision to end the partnership was made because ACU's policies do not align with the district's commitment to inclusivity, among other things. The district is committed to creating a safe environment for LGBTQ plus students, staff, and community. The decision has been criticized by ACU President Len Munsell, who believes it's unlawful and will hurt the district students, and by some teachers who view it as discrimination against all employees of faith, especially Christians. And that is this week's Christian News Roll. See, I think that the battle cry these days is we'll try anything and see if it sticks, because some things are just sort of obviously discriminatory.
Yeah.
But then what happens is someone says, "Yeah, we'll just do it anyway."
Throw it at the wall, see if it sticks. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, and because maybe we can convince a court to just go with it. Because law and things like that. What does that mean? It's just a matter of who you can convince, right?
Well, and I think there's an important point made at the end there that teachers, okay, these were student teachers. These were essentially assistants and helpers in the classroom, kind of. That's what the Arizona Christian University was providing. But of course, the school district employs, full-time teachers. And that sounds like, some of those on staff are looking at the situation and going, wait
a minute, I'm Christian.
what if they say next that I go to a church whose values don't align with what is the statement there? The something about the inclusivity. Yeah, they do not align with the district's commitment to inclusivity. And so it's like, well, that wasn't part of the hiring process, and nor should it be. You shouldn't be able to say, well, think carefully how you're going to answer, but what church do you go to? Or do you go to church? Yeah, and you just don't want to go down that way. But here, they're clearly discriminating in this sense, is that these ACU students, they're signing the document, that says, hey, I'm respecting these other people, and I respect inclusivity, and or at least I'm going to behave like I do. That sort of a thing. When I am in the classroom, I'm going to behave like I can not be against a certain viewpoint. So, and yet after having signed that, and the other thing too is that there is not, at least it's not in this story brought out, any instance of wrongdoing where somebody said, you signed it, but then you went ahead and did this. It's like, there's no
that. It's just
there's no instigating incident. It's just like, well, because we think you are basically, you're not rah on our side. And that's why we want to make sure you don't have a chance rather to influence young minds. We're the only ones who get to influence the young minds.
See, there's like an overemphasis on that word influence, because they used to just say YouTuber. Now they say influencer.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I'm talking about classroom influence.
Oh, I know.
Outside of just
the thing is they assume that there's some aspect of, well, everyone falls under someone's influence, and we have to watch out for that, as though it's like an infection.
Wait a minute. I mean, I beg to differ. I am the influencer. I want, man, y'all just pull out a notepad and start taking notes from here on out, because, you're going to get the good stuff. And yeah, I mean, if they want to call me a YouTube influencer or I don't know. I'm not on, what is that thing? TikTok. So I guess I'm not a TikTok influencer, but wait, just give me time.
Yeah, just give me some time. Oh, man.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's not even speaking of time, but, this one right here where, I mean, we've heard over and over and over again, the phrase, what is it that they say? Conversion therapy. And they turned because, there's a there is a definition of conversion therapy, speaking of influencing, right? But, generally just coming in and sitting down and talking to your therapist, it's not conversion therapy. That's talking to your therapist. And the therapist is trained to help.
And
not just say,
historically, you were never, ever, not government, not church, not anybody was supposed to ask about what are you talking to your therapist about? Right. That was off limits. Everybody understood
Right.
that was off limits. So,
But
the idea that we're going to put rails, on, so you don't go off the road on either side, but we're going to put rails that say you can't talk about this, this, and this. It's like, wait a minute, that's not how therapy works. A lot of here's the thing. So therapy, I know enough about it, even though I'm not a clinical practitioner or anything like that. But I know a lot about therapy is not trying to give people answers, but trying to get them to think about the right questions and reflect on themselves and where they are. And so what if in therapy somebody starts reflecting on, how they came to maybe in the first place decide, he or she is gay or lesbian, or maybe they want to talk out loud about, their I don't know, things that they received at the hands of their mother or their father. Okay. And maybe it strays into this territory, this forbidden territory. What's the therapist supposed to do? Put down his notebook and pencil and say,
oh, no, can't talk about that.
Yeah. Oh, I know it's really burdensome, isn't it? But yeah. You know what you need, buddy, is if you were like over 21, you could go to a bar. And then you could talk this stuff out. That'd be great.
It reminds me of that Bob Newhart sketch that shows on YouTube.
What's that?
Well, this is the being afraid of being buried alive in a box.
Oh, yeah.
So it comes along and said, well, my childhood. And he says, no, wait, we don't go there. He's got a list of things that they won't talk about. It's like, good.
Okay. So anyway, this ban on, or this, I don't know exactly how to call it, but it's a straitjacket that was put on the therapist. So basically in court, it has been decided that no, we can't put therapists and mental health counselors in that kind of straitjacket. So, so it's a win for, if Christians want to say it's a win for our side, fine. But really what it is it's a win for good mental health medicine and care. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. See, I've had enough contact with that over time, over the last couple of years with my job. And, you definitely need to be honest. You can't just say that something's off limits, because what if that's the thing that's the problem? That's what's right. Anyway, it's just a real problem. Now, I know that there's a lot of people that are calling it a victory that you can strip Planned Parenthood of public funds, because that's been something that's been going on for a long time. It goes back and forth, depending on who winds up in office. But now it appears that a court has told them, yep, this, since the climate has changed a bit, and it's now back in the hands of, whether abortion is legal in a state is back in the hands of the state, then, yep, they can decide where that money goes. So I guess you could call it a win. I don't know enough about Planned Parenthood other than there's a lot of people that hate them, to know like what kind of impact that would have on them. I know that some people are probably hoping that it has enough of a negative impact to put them out of business in various places. I would assume that that's what some people are hoping for. But there's a win. There you go. But one of the things that got me was like, well, we're gonna have no opposition to this at all as long as it doesn't take place before June 1st. I'm like, I could not find anywhere that explained why that was. They said, well, as long as it doesn't happen before June 1st, no one's going to oppose this reinstatement. I don't know what's special about June 1st.
I don't think anything is special about it. I just think that somebody decided you have to have at least enough amount of time for people to plan accordingly, and you know, uh, otherwise, you can't say, oh, and by the way, it goes into effect Monday. Well, I guess you could say it, but some people might say, oh,
Well, I guess it
no
could have
heads up.
something to do. It could have something to do with budgets, maybe.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Well, that's another possibility. Is maybe I don't know. That doesn't strike me as, I don't know what it is, but
Well,
yeah,
let's.
it could have something to do with the budgets. It could have something to do with, okay, without budget, you're not going to, you're going to be basically laying people off, and well, I don't understand. I don't even understand either, because people get laid off all the time, like sometimes for the lamest reasons, but they do. So
Yeah.
I don't see that it would affect so many people layoffs in this particular segment, you know, of the that it really would matter. But
I don't know.
I don't know. Somebody had a reason for June 1. So
I don't
anyhow,
know. It just seems like that's going to come up again. That's the reason why it matters. It's, people are thinking, why are they talking about this? It's like, it just seems like it. If I had spider sense, it would be tingling.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
tingle on this then. So, what do you think this is about California cutting ties with with Walgreens?
There must not
And
be any CVS in all of California, because as far as I know, CVS is doing the same thing.
I mean, so
I should look that up,
when
actually.
you say cut, I mean, when somebody reports that we're going to cut ties, or the governor announces that, okay, from here on out, this is the position the California state government's going to take. Well, what do you mean? I mean, you're not going to go in and say, by the way, Walgreens, you're not welcome to operate and do business in our state anymore. I don't think that's what it means. I don't think it means that you can tell them you got to close up shop and pull out. So
Yeah, it turns out
and,
there's lots of CVS, and because CVS also got the same letter, saying, and as far as I know, they're doing the same thing.
well, in the states, let's say the states that sent the letter telling them this isn't going to be allowed, this was partly about filling a prescription. I think some of this was about filling prescriptions by mail, although I could be wrong on that, about this abortion inducing drug. Okay. Well, clearly California did not state that they wanted that. So in one sense, Walgreens and CVS in there, if they have those out there, they're just acting in their own best interest, the way they have been for the last, I don't know, however long they've been operating in the state of California, and as long as Roe v. Wade was in effect. So I think this is about California saying we can punish you for hearkening to what other states want you to do. I mean,
Well,
is
we
that what
can't
this
round
is?
you up and put you in the Tower of California and torture you until you do what we want, but we can essentially boycott you.
Well, yeah, but I mean, is it really a boycott, or what does that mean that we cut
I don't
ties?
know. I mean, what does a state?
I think you said it best before. I think you said it best before we got on the air, is that this is politicking and posturing,
It's
and that's about it.
that's what it is. He has, like, I don't live in California. He hasn't, since COVID kind of went down, like, people really don't think about it all that much. He doesn't get as much news play as he used to. So
He's
maybe
probably
he
happy
just,
about that, frankly.
well, you're not wrong. Um, but the thing is he needs something, and this came along, and they thought, yeah, we'll just go off about this, and okay, great. Like I said, CVS is also in California, and I actually can't find anything that says CVS went one way or the other. CVS didn't get mentioned. CVS also received the same letters from, the attorneys general stating that you shouldn't be doing this. But it didn't even come up. It's
Okay,
just a threat to Walgreens.
So the governor's statement, it's at the end of the story, but it still doesn't explain much. It says Newsom stated that the state government would not, and this is what I'm reading now, pursue business with companies that cave to right-wing bullies pushing their extremist agendas. Okay, so will not pursue business with companies. Again, other than like, okay, so let's just say all the state employees have the same basic health insurance plan. What are you going to say, that you can't fulfill your prescriptions for your lisinopril, for your blood pressure medicine at Walgreens anymore because we don't do business? And so that trickles down to the insurance company that the state contracts with won't let you fill your prescriptions there. I mean, it's just really, really murky. I don't know what it means. You don't know what it means.
And it remains murky because when a spokesperson was asked about it, for the governor, said that all relationships between California and Walgreens are under review, but they declined to elaborate on how business ties might change.
Okay.
So what happens is
if you're a Christian in California, and you were hoping that well, I don't know what you're hoping for, because you're a Christian in California, you should know how your state operates. You're not going to expect the California state legislature to begin even restricting abortion. So I guess for you, nothing's changed. You can continue to make some noise. You continue to protest, whatever you think is the appropriate response you should have. And the biggest thing you can do is you can try to elect different leadership, different governor and other elected officials. If you want to see the change, it's actually the way you're supposed to do it, is elect the people that you think support your views. Aside from that, man,
yeah,
you shouldn't go to Walgreens anymore. Well, I just was trying to pick up a birthday card for somebody. They got nice cards.
No.
I'm sorry.
No. Hey, let's tell somebody a yes here.
What's that?
Well, let's talk about the YouTube channel. So we have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You can go there and search for Radical Grace Radio. It's not a .com. It's just, it's like it is on YouTube. It's a channel. And we started putting up versions of our show, video versions, kind of like you're probably listening to the podcast right this second, but you can go there, check it out, and tell us what you think of it. Because we have parlayed some of the funds that come our way into doing this, because we think that we think that it's time for some thinking with the mind of Christ, really.
And we thank those who have been faithful supporters for a long time. Even small gifts add up. And so, and the fact of the matter is that the bar for entry into YouTube isn't actually that expensive. So it's affordable, considering that we've got people who do support us. And, this is where we're grateful, but we're also, hoping that we can beg your indulgence while we kind of learn. I mean, there was a reason why it was a podcast and at different times a radio broadcast show for a long, long, long time. You ever heard of a face for radio?
So what are we going to do on the other side of the break, Pastor?
Well, we've got a great Lenten aspect to explore, how we look at Lent, but versus how another notable church tradition looks at Lent. And we're going to compare and contrast some things, and maybe give some food for thought.
So stick with us when we'll be back with more Radical Grace Radio in just a moment. welcome back to Radical Grace Radio. You know, all those times, like, you know, in the previous season when we had Advent, and, you know, I always tell people, I say, you know, that's one of the biggest discoveries from becoming a Lutheran was Advent, right? Well, you know, and I always say that I love it. Well, you know, Lent is sort of like, you know, the other version of that, you know, and I'm not so sure that I love Lent. I don't hate it.
No.
It has a different flavor to it. And,
It sure does. You know, what people who are not in our church circles, and we tell them that, well, we're going to have Ash Wednesday services, we're going to have Lenten services, and sometimes they have a basic understanding of what Lent is, and sometimes they don't. And but oftentimes, here's what they'll do is they'll say, well, especially if they're unfamiliar with Lent, they'll say, wasn't that kind of more of a Catholic thing, right? Well, they do, and I can understand where they could say that, although really it's part of a tradition that's broader than just the Roman Catholic Church, that's for sure. The other thing too is that the Roman Catholic way, or their approach to the themes of Lent and how to think about what we should be thinking about, we should be striving for in the season of Lent, it overlaps to some extent with the Lutheran emphases, but they're not the same. They're not identical. And I just really became aware of that most recently, was that I just kind of thought that their approach to Lenten observances was the same as ours. And to some extent, there's certainly the same tone. And by the time you get to Holy Week, you're definitely having, you know, that last week of our Lord's life on this earth. There's all the drama, right, that takes place in Jerusalem between the triumphal entry and the Last Supper, the prayer in the garden, and then the trial before Pilate, and the crucifixion. So that's definitely their focus. That's our focus. We both observe Good Friday. It's oftentimes we both use the same kind of, you know, the words of Jesus from the cross as the format for our service. So I do agree there's a lot of overlap. But after you get past Ash Wednesday, there is in the weeks in between, there is a little bit difference. And so I'll start by saying what I know that is for Lutherans generally true. And again, don't overplay this. I think most of our Roman Catholic brethren are also feeling the same kinds of things, but we have a sense that this is a season for repentance, for reflection, for taking stock of ourselves, and thinking about what the Lord wants us to address. You know, I keep on using the same kind of metaphors. It's like there are people that they know that there are things in their lives they ought to be addressing, and they sure seem to still keep wanting to kick the can down the road. And eventually what God says is like, okay, you know, you've been doing that long enough. Now's the time to really stop what you're doing and think about where you are and why you're in this condition, and address it for real. And so, well, that fits in with our idea of Lent. I mean, that fits in with this time of personal reflection. And I think that there's some of that also in the Roman Catholic observance of Lent, but I find out that this is sort of new information for me. That three things that I would say, they're part of Lent, but they are really important for the Roman Catholic observance of Lent. They call them, in fact, I've heard them referred to as the three pillars of Lent. Do you know what they are? You ever heard of these? Okay, let me just tell you what they are. The first one is prayer. Uh-huh. Okay, what do you think would maybe logically go with prayer? Prayer and
fasting.
Fasting. Okay, so that actually is
that one of the things that I knew coming into the Lutheran Church about Lent, I actually learned from cartoons.
Oh, really?
Because you saw in cartoons over and over again, you know, the joke of like someone ate meat today, and then they see the calendar and it says Meatless Friday.
Nah. I haven't seen those cartoons. Sorry, but
Well,
okay, but
almost every Warner Brothers thing had at least once in a while that would pop up. In
okay.
a
Well,
cartoon.
okay, we're going to get to that. The idea that there's certain dietary changes you make during Lent,
Right.
and so we'll put it all under sort of the broad rubric of fasting, even though there's actually a distinction, but within that. But then the third one is almsgiving or giving charitably to the poor. So any kind of gifts you give to the poor for their relief, and including acts of charity. So maybe what you're doing is not so much opening your wallet, is you're doing something, an act of service that is with the intent of helping the poor. And okay, so prayer, fasting, almsgiving. Generally speaking, those are the three things that they would, in the Roman Catholic tradition, want people to focus on during the season of Lent. So I thought what we'd do is kind of from an outsider point of view, but still, it's not like these things are all strange to us entirely. But let's talk about them, and then in the end, let's wind up weighing the pros and cons, the benefits, cost benefits or whatever between how Lutherans approach it and how Roman Catholics approach it. But for the Lutherans looking at it, like let's take the first one, prayer. Okay, well, we certainly don't have any disagreement about that. You can take the time, and maybe that you should be. Well, when I say should be, you understand that the Christian life is a life that also includes and in many ways doesn't quit circling around prayer. It's a vital activity, and yet many of us aren't very regular in prayer, and so that could be something where that might be one of those things the Lord wants you to address. And so you're just thinking, well, I'm going to try and do something about that. And for the Roman Catholics as well, they're kind of in the same boat on that. They're trying to be more prayerful, however you understand that, during the season of Lent. What I find is that you don't get too many really practical helps from either the Roman Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church as far as, well, okay, if I do want to become more prayerful, if I want to have a more active prayer life, at least during Lent, and maybe it's going to continue on after Lent, well, how would I go about doing that? And so here's a suggestion. Okay, so one of the things that everybody would start off with and certainly count as a good prayer to use during the season, anytime, and not just season of Lent, anytime, is the Lord's Prayer. And so praying the Lord's Prayer and really thinking about those petitions. I did a video series, a number on Risen Savior's YouTube channel. And we went through the at some length the Lord's Prayer, and we went through it petition by petition. I just think that it is so rich for learning Christian discipling, discipleship. What does it mean to be Christ's disciple? I think he gives you the whole the curriculum is right there in the Lord's Prayer. You can focus on one petition after another, and in the end, you're going to wind up sort of getting it. Okay, so I know that the Roman Catholics would also throw in. Well, they would include the the various Hail Marys and the Gloria Dei, the glory be to God the Father, and God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. That kind of short prayer, or at least it could be in the form of a prayer, would be how they would expand prayer to include many different ways of glorifying God. They would say that's an important aspect. Because here's the thing, and this Protestants, and not just Protestants, but we all do this all the time. What so often happens, as far as in real life, when people decide to start praying? Who do they pray for first?
What do they pray for first?
Who do they pray for first? probably themselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes it's because they are in difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because they're very aware of their condition, whether they want to have something good happen in their lives or whether they want to get over something bad in their lives. Um, yeah, there's a reason why we talk about foxhole prayers, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a very and there's a place. There's I don't want to make it sound like a prayer for yourself is not a good thing. In fact, I think it's very necessary, although it's not just about you. Like your prayers are not just to focus on yourself and where you need to improve, even if you're trying to make it spiritual, you know, oh, I want to be a better Christian. I'm praying to God to fill me with the Holy Spirit. I'm praying for this and that. Okay, it sounds very spiritual. You're not just praying for, your your arthritis and things like that. You can pray for all kinds of things in your own life, but what else should you pray for? Or what else can you pray for? Well, if you have I know some people have um, a hymnal at home. You think, well, isn't that a little bit unusual? No, not really. Lutherans in the past almost always had a copy of the hymnal in the home. And you'll find that in the hymnal, there are going to be areas or places where you can find prayers, prayers for different occasions. So some of those might be useful. But even then, okay, so now you've got some pre-written or pre-constructed prayers, and what we're really trying to do is maybe develop a deeper sense of prayer. So here's a suggestion I'll make is you can take, well, there's 7 days in a week, right? So 7 days in a week. And let's say you're going to take, for each of those days, you're going to try and pray for 15 minutes on a particular topic. This is my attempt at being practical about this. So, whether you assign a topic to a day. So all I need is 7 of them. So you can spend you yourself and your own spiritual condition and maybe things going on in your life. That can be one day, but your family can be another, right? Your family, the people that you are in your household, your church can be another day where you're praying for your church family, the things that are going on amongst the believers where you worship. Then you can also have another day. So this would be day 4 if you're doing them in this order. You wouldn't have to. You could do it in any order. You could pray for your local community, your town or your city. What kinds of things are you facing as a community? And then maybe the next day you zoom out and you pray for the nation. What is our prayer for this country, for the directions it's going in, for the things that are happening to us, and lastly, of course, not lastly, there's 2 more, but the if you zoom it out one more time, you could pray for the world. Like maybe you're going to pray for the peace of the world. We pray for that quite often in the liturgy on Sundays, for the peace of the whole world, right? The well-being of the Church of God.
Church of God. Yeah,
that's right. So, so when you're praying for the whole world, and you still need one more, or if you want to assign something unique to each of the 7 days, okay, so this is going to tie in with some of the other things in Lent. Maybe you do take the poor, specifically the poor, as the subject of your prayers for the 7th day, or it could be those who are sick. It could be lots of things, but let's just use the poor. So, okay, I'm going to try and pray about the poor, pray for the poor, and because it's such a day, it's Friday, it's whatever day it is that I do that subject. Well, how do I keep from repeating myself? If I don't repeat myself when I'm praying this Friday, how am I at least going to keep myself from repeating myself verbatim next Friday? And the way I look at it is like, well, okay, so you take different aspects. you take different aspects of the poor. So you could pray specifically for the poor in one week, for those who are hungry, right? Those simply they don't have enough to eat. Those are the kinds of people that Risen Savior really provides a meaningful benefit to through the God's Pantry food pantry, right? We're trying to make sure as best as that ministry is able to alleviate any kind of hunger, suffering from hunger. But other people don't have pantries like that available. So you can pray for the poor and for those who are hungry. Then you might say, well, okay, now the next week I'm still praying for the poor, but I'm praying for the homeless. Okay. That's a little different category. Then the next one is like, well, it's not so much the hungry or the homeless this week. I'm praying for the unemployed, people who are, man, they want to find a job and they just can't. And then, another week it can be those who are struggling with addiction, because a lot of times the reason people are homeless or they are poor in the first place is they have problems with physical addictions. And it's easy to see why you'd be poor. I mean, if you're taking your paycheck and turning it into booze or some kind of illicit drug, that stuff's expensive, right? So yeah, you may be you're taking rent money and you're putting it into something that is poison. Okay, so but the truly addicted are going to need some kind of help breaking that addiction. They're almost certainly not just going to do it on their own. They at the very least need God's help. So we can pray for those who are addicted, and maybe you come up with a different aspect too. But you could do that with each one of these. I mean, so when you're praying for the world, for instance, you could pray for the whole world, but maybe one day you decide to pull out a map of the world. Not like people actually use paper maps anymore. I mean, it is 2023. So you open your phone and you got a map. But maybe you think about, the people in a specific area, specific region or country, and especially like when, and this happened recently, there's a horrific earthquake. Well, then you pray for those who are affected directly by that earthquake. And the same with other kinds of disasters. But it wouldn't have to be a disaster. It could be anything that would be prayer for the people in that area who need God to come to their aid, that kind of thing. And so you could do that. You could do that kind of different aspect, different emphasis for each of these 7. And so you'd wind up, by the time you got to the end of Lent, you would have, well, even if you just were spending even the time you spend praying for yourself, if you're praying for yourself in different ways. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father. Those could be objects of your prayer. So that's my suggestion for practically adding a dimension of more prayer to your life during Lent. Again, combining that with, say, the Lord's Prayer and other prayers that you happen to know or like. I think that that's good. I think that would be a helpful practice. So the next thing again, let's take the next thing on the list of Roman Catholic practices or emphases is fasting. Okay, which when I said fasting, there's sort of this subcategory that's called abstinence, but it doesn't sound like what it sounds like to me. So fasting really is, as I've read to understand their practice, on certain days. Specifically, I think it's Good Friday and Ash Wednesday are 2 days for fasting, where the fasting really means you should, if you're going to be an observant Catholic and doing the right thing, you should limit yourself that day to one meal for that whole day. Or if that would be unhealthy to do that, some people have like blood sugar problems doing that. So you could have two smaller meals, as long as they didn't add up collectively to more than what one meal would be. And so that's a kind of fasting. You're actually you're going through that day with less food, as opposed to abstinence, where what you're doing is you're abstaining from usually meat. I mean, it might be other things too in addition, but this is where you made the thing about a joke, not the joke, the observation about the cartoons and the meatless Fridays.
Right.
Okay, so that's while you can categorize it under fasting, that their view is that, well, that's a kind of abstaining from this food, that we only abstain from it on certain days, but it's for the purpose of, well, you look at what is the purpose? Well, chiefly, it seems that their view is that when you are abstaining from or fasting, either way, you are empathizing, perhaps that's the right word, with the poor, people who either are already going hungry, not necessarily by choice, but then also because back in previous generations, meat was something that really the rich, or at least the financially secure, had access to. The poor did not. And because meat was generally more expensive than fish, seafood, that kind of thing, the idea is that, well, you're kind of taking a step back from a rich meal with lots of meat and things to a simpler, sparser meal,
Right.
maybe just some bread and some fish, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the idea, that by doing so, you're kind of putting yourself in the position, or in the the position, I guess, of somebody who is not well off. You're empathizing with the poor again. So does that make sense? Well, I mean, I guess you could do that. I don't know that that's, I suppose if you could intentionally decide, I want to think about those who are hungry when I am fasting or when I am abstaining from meat. And okay, so that potentially is a good purpose. It also is supposed to, especially since Ash Wednesday, I think, is both a day of abstinence and a day of fasting. I think that it is intended to have people think about intentionally Jesus fasting in the wilderness for 40 days. So you kind of think, well, especially if you've got hunger pains going on, you go, well, so did Jesus. Jesus went through this for us as part of his greater complete passion. He has to undergo this time of testing and temptation, and well, this is what he underwent for mankind, and so I can get a feel for it to some extent. And I think also another thing they're trying to do is say, and this one I don't buy so much. They're trying to say, well, instead of thinking about food and the body, what you're going to do during Lent is take the emphasis off of food and the body and really focus it more on the spiritual, the interior things. Yeah, well, okay. My thinking on that is that if you're like, if your stomach is growling, what you want to be spiritual about it, but what is the likelihood that you're really going to be focused on purely spiritual things, or where is your mind going to be going? I mean, I know myself.
Food.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be thinking about, I'm really ready to eat something.
This is that temptation in the wilderness that you and I are going to fail, where Jesus didn't.
Okay, well, that's one way of looking at it. But if the idea was to get my mind off of the body onto spiritual things, and now what I've done is I've set up certain conditions where all I can think about is my body, and yeah, that shows a weakness on my part. For sure it does. For sure it does. But it's still the reality that I'm dealing with currently. So if the idea was to get my mind on spiritual things, that may not be the best way to go about doing it. Now we know Jesus, of course, 40 days he fasted in the wilderness. And Jesus talks about fasting as though it's a matter of course that people will fast. He doesn't say if you fast. He says when you fast, don't do these things. Don't do it, with the sad face in front of people so that they see you're fasting and things like that. So he gives some pointers, if you will, about what would make your fast more profitable. St. Paul seems to have at least sometimes practiced fasting, and I know that in Christian circles, outside of Roman Catholicism, even in fact, there's I forget why can't I remember? It's the Egyptian church, it's the Coptic church. That's right. And I knew of I heard about a person that was staying with a Coptic family, and they themselves weren't from that Coptic religion. Well, they didn't know that there were going to be whole days where nobody ate anything. It was just part of their practice in that form of Christianity, that they take fasting as a serious obligation. So Luther doesn't really talk much. He says in Who's to Receive the Sacrament Worthily, he does say something positive about fasting. He says fasting and bodily preparation is fine for getting ready to receive the sacrament, but the one who really worthily receives the sacrament is the one who has by faith understood what these gifts are. So that's the kind of thing that Luther's more interested in. But that just leaves the last of the three, and that's almsgiving. And of course, what we already said is about donating, but it's not like just giving to your church. If you just give your church so that will do the normal things that the church is always doing, which is still something you're expected to do. But this is about really giving specifically for something that will relieve the poor. Now, it turns out from the Catholic viewpoint, a lot of times that just boils down to making an extra donation to one of the different Catholic charities. So you still send the check off, you don't see where it goes. But the idea that you can do something to make a difference, that doesn't sound like a bad idea at all. The thing is that there's no way of knowing how much. It's up to your conscience, and I guess that's the good way to do it. It is up to your conscience, but it should be. But did I give enough or not? Do I need to keep giving? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think personally the advice, and that's what I'm going to call it for now, on prayer is actually something that's because if there was something that any of us could do better or to strive to do better during a time of Lent, it could be prayer. Because, you learn things about the other aspects of Lent through that, probably. So, thanks for listening to Radical Grace Radio today. May God bless you.